With 6, they're looking at functions, 2 directions on functions. You can write your own functions, which is what they do in the second half. And in the first part of it, and at the very end, they talk about functions that are built in. And so they talk about the random number function as the first one. And how that's going to work in flow rhythm, I'm not sure.
Flow rhythm, you can have functions.
But we got functions in there. Because we're going to call a function.
So what are the functions that it comes pre-built with?
The pre-built ones? That's a good question. Enter a function name.
Function manager. Delimit arguments with parentheses.
Hit the on button so y'all can see what I'm doing. So we can add a function, which was what we used for the modules. Now if we call, and we can call that function obviously, function manager. This allows you to delete, edit, and create functions. Alright, so there, that looks like it's doing the same thing they've got as far as function, the add function thing, because it does the same thing for you. Well, let us call any built-in ones. Random was random. That's what the book says it was, wasn't it? Don't think actually we don't need anything on random. I'm going to have to look and see if they do have library functions in here, but I'm betting they don't.
More than likely, they probably don't have their own pre-built functions.
Any pre-built function for you. So you'll just have to put that you're calling it and it's not going to work for you again, okay? Just like with modules, that will know it's returning a value to us at that point of whatever it is, but it's not going to give it to us. I'll try that when I get home this afternoon, since we're headed home early. And see. The random number function. Because that would be in an assign statement anyway, so why am I doing that? It's not going to be a call statement to a function. Calling a function, you're actually going to use an assign statement to call. Because you're returning a value from it, so. X equals random parentheses, because random shouldn't need, it could have a value put on it, but I don't think you have to put a value on random. The random function requires one argument. Okay, it does work. So you just told me it knows about it. So if I give it a number, because that's going to tell it what to generate its random numbers from. And now if I do it, helps if I declare it. Forgot to declare X. Now I'm going to make that real intentionally. Now if I run, it ran. It's output X. Run it, and I get 0 back. I change that seed number to 51 and I run. It returned a random number from me. Off. Should be, I think it's between 1 and that. Does their random number thing use 2 numbers? I think if you just put 1 in most languages, it's telling you to do it from between 1 and that number. And the book tells you it's between, to give both numbers. So we'll try that and see if it does work. No, their random number function generator will only take 1 number. But random number generator does work here. And so if I run it, I got 31 this time. Okay? I got 36 last time, remember? If I run it again, I got 35. Run it again, I got 37. Not being very randomness to it because it's giving us everything that's right there in the 30s, and if this was drawing lottery numbers on it, we know what numbers we want to go down to the store and buy.
30 numbers I got was 11, 14, 23.
Okay. And what are you using as seed number?
35.
35?
I just got 18.
Let's see, I got 51. Now I got 29 on this one. Now I got 5. Okay, it's jumping around now.
Let's see.
So the random number generator is going to generate you random numbers. The book talks about that you can tell it in certain languages. You can tell it the area, the sequence in between, which is usually what you can do. I'm not sure why this one doesn't let you do it, but I think one of the languages it uses only lets you put in what's the high number and assumes 1 always as your starting number. Because actually when you use the random number generator, what quite often people do when they're using that is they'll have it generate between 1 and 10, and then they multiply it, that if they were wanting numbers between 1 and 100. Although this is returning, I told it to return a real, and I'm just getting integers back. So it's not a full randomness here in Flogarhythm in any event, okay? But it is doing randomly for us.
If you put in 100, it works a lot better. Light's going everywhere. I got 68, 17, 8.
Okay.
9.
So if the seed's 100, it works a whole lot better on it.
Yeah, it goes,
Okay.
it goes everywhere.
Well, the seed at 51, we were seeing, we had a lot of 30s and 29, and finally got one here that's at 5. Okay? But keep in mind that a random generator there on the computer is not completely random. Okay?
To where it loops in.
It's picking out of there, but it's not just completely randomness, but it's pretty random on it, okay? But, so for all intents and purposes, they're random. So, it notes there that you could use them in games, to do your dice and anything else that you did on it. Simulation programs do on it, and that you do others to select just random numbers on it. Security can also use them in encrypting and use a random number where it uses its base off of to make it even more difficult. So random number generator is always built in there, but with the module, when you did modules, remember we did calls to the modules. With functions, you're going to return it as a value to you. Okay, so it's going to return a value to it. So you're always going to use a function in an assign statement. Does everybody follow on that? Because it's going to bring a value back that you're going to put into a variable. So that's going to get you the random numbers on it. You can also do, and so they show you about where you can do some different things on it and play games with it and stuff to it. You can use the function besides in an assign statement. It could be used in a print statement to just say print random whatever instead of a variable name there, that it could be used right there. So the random sort of works like that. It could also be used in the if statement, as they show you on page 234, where they do a random to return a value between 1 or 2, and that they then display heads or tails based on that to have it sit there and flip a coin. Okay? Second thing is you can write your own function. So you're writing a module that returns a value. Now, regular modules can return multiple values, remember, but we couldn't do them in Flogorithm, okay? Because Flogorithm really is just doing modified functions to it. That you would do the function and it's going to look like your modules, and you'll actually do it in the same format on it. Except that if you were doing it correctly, you would call it function on it for the start and bottom of it, and when you did it in the other way, in the pseudocode. So, but with the flow chart, you can bring in, you can tell it how many values you're going to bring in, and you can bring in as many values as you want. Now, you would, not in Flogorithm you won't do this, but in regular drawing flow charts you could indicate if their integers are real. In Flogorithm you'll bring them in, but you'll declare them immediately thereafter of whichever it was. And so you can bring in a number of different values, but you return one value. And the end of that function is a return statement that returns you back to wherever you were with the value that it called for. Y'all get the idea on that one? So functions are going to basically work as far as writing your own function. It's like writing the modules basically, except you return a value at the end of it. Okay? And it's just one value gets returned, and you would normally say return and whatever it is you're returning. However, I'm suspicious it may not work exactly right for us on that, but we'll just do our best job at it. So you can do things out there to return, and they're working just like modules essentially. So functions and modules, if you're writing your own, are similar. Now, there are a lot of other functions that come with your programming language, which they're calling the library functions, because they keep those functions in a library out there, and that's actually what they call it. They keep them in, sort of like the library down the hall keeps all those books sitting in there. It's ones that are built in with your language. We've already seen Flogorithm definitely includes random. How many of these others it includes, I don't know, but it probably includes a number of them. Some of it may not. Square roots, the first one they mention, that you send it a number, it's going to have a number that you send it out with, and it returns back a value that's the square root of that number. Flogorithm probably has square root. I don't know that for sure, but it probably does. Then they talk about the POW function. It may or may not have that one. That's the opposite of the square root. That's raising a number to a power. And so you can use the POW one to do that. And then the absolute one, what that does is takes a real number and drops everything after the decimal point when it returns it to you. Okay, so it basically takes a real number and turns it into an integer. Y'all follow? Cosine and sine and tangent are all geometry functions. that you can tell it that if y'all took geometry, you remember you had to do such things, and here you can build it in your program. It's actually already out there to do it, and that you can tell it to call the function on it. And think about on your scientific calculators, there's a function button there for cosine, sine, and all of these that is built into the calculator as a function. It's actually a function there for you. Round is one they mention also here to you, which will round your number either up or down. Absolute, remember, just drops everything after the decimal point. Round says if it's 0.5 or higher, make it the next number, or if it's less than 0.5, make it the smaller number. You also follow the difference in absolute and round. Sometimes students have a problem with those two. Data type conversion, they mention about those. Those are real handy, that you can take a real number and change it to an integer, which the not POW, but the absolute actually did the same thing. And what it does is that it will take an integer value, it will take a real value and returns an integer of it, which means it dropped everything after the decimal point also. Or you can take a real number and convert it, an integer and convert it to a real number so that it's stored in a real variable now. Instead of, you can usually, most languages get away with saying and real variable equals an integer variable, and I'll handle it internally, but the function one on it does it smoother on that, so you can do that approach on that one. The formatting functions are interesting ones that may be fun to you, and that's where you can change your string values to how they look. Okay? So they mention about the length function. You can tell it to look at a string variable and tell you how long the value of it is. So we could put length parentheses quote Watt quote, and what value would it return to us? If I had length parentheses quote Watt quote, what would the answer come back as?
What?
Quote Watt quote is inside parentheses on the length function. 4, because there's 4 letters in Watt.
Really?
Okay? So it will count whatever it is you give it, that string variable. And you could put it as a string variable there, and where you'd said, prior to that you said name equals Brandon. Okay? And then you had length parentheses name parentheses, that you had x equals name parentheses name parentheses. When it ran that, then when it saw it, it would look at Anthony and count, or look at Brandon and count 6, right? 7? Yeah, 7. It would return the value of 7 because there's 7 letters in the name. Does that make sense? So it's just going to count how many on it. It's going to count spaces as a character. Because remember, a space actually does use an ASCII character sitting out there. Okay?
Okay, so that's good for, like...
So if you're wanting to know lengths of names of whatever, it does real neat for that one. And there's times you want to know how long different things, words are and stuff,
Yeah.
and it'll do it for you. Append will take 2 strings and put them together into a new one. So you've inputted the last name, you've inputted the first name, but you just want to reference it as name now, that has the first and the last name, that then you can go and use name equals append first name comma last name, and it will combine first name and last name. Now, warning on that, you actually want to do it with 3 fields on that, because what that would do is, if it was my name, we'd end up with, that result would be that. That's probably not what we wanted. We really wanted space sitting in between there, right?
Yes.
So when you did the append, you would tell it append first name, comma, quote, space, quote, comma, last name, and then it would put a space between it when it created that new field. Y'all see how that works? And so that can make it work real nicely where you've had them type in the first name and the last name, and that's a big place to do it. You had them type it in as two separate fields, and you want to be able to work with it sometimes as first name and last name, but you also, like when you go to address the envelope to them, you want it to look nicely, all typed nicely right there together, first name and last name, not first name and then a whole bunch of spaces where over of however the longest first names can be and then last name. That we want it to have the last name right by the first name, not way over, sitting off separated. And y'all get letters occasionally from companies that it looks like it tried to be a personalized letter to you, and you look at it and go, there's no way, because it's my first name, a ton of spaces, and my last name. They didn't append those fields together to do it correctly. 2 upper and 2 lower will allow you to change the name, the string from to not from, but change it to either all uppercase letters or to all lowercase letters. Doesn't care which type of letters it had in there. It'll then make the new value of it is either all upper or all lower. Then depending on the language you're in, they've got some other associated ones like that where you can go to word case on it where it does the first letter uppercase and first letter uppercase and the rest of the letters in it lowercase, and so on. Substring lets us go in and break it apart and say that we want to start at a certain position and then go for so many characters of breaking it. That one gets a little trickier on it, so y'all really, that's probably beyond what y'all want to do in here. But it does do pretty neat on it. The contains one allows you to look and see if a string variable contains a certain value in it, and that you can be looking for a certain value. Guess what? Your find command on all the different things you use actually use that function doing that. You can also convert strings to real or to integer as long as their numeric values were in the string. So you could have brought, for instance, zip code can be read in as a string, and then you go, wait a minute, I want to do calculations on the zip code for some reason. You can convert it to a number field using the string to integer or string to real. You can also use a function as your comparison in an if statement and say, all right, if it's integer or if it's real, and you don't have to write out the whole statement, you call it to a function saying is real or is integer, and then what the variable is you've got right there, and it will return to you and tell you whether or not it will return a Boolean value of either yes it is integer or no it's not integer, or yes it is real or no it's not real. And then you can do stuff off there. That there is chapter 6 on the Reader's Digest version. But y'all got the short and simple one. But we've covered the information there, and I think both of y'all are catching on to it pretty well of what we're doing with functions. I think this will be an easier chapter for you, other than the fact of exactly how much of it will work real well in Flogorithm. Like we've already seen on the random that you're limited to one number to put into the random on it. That you've already done the random now, so you exactly know how to use it. And I'm not sure which assignments I assigned actually off this. But that you can then do them on it. They actually have you writing a function, I know, on at least one or two, and you should use one, but I'm not sure. But I think I'll probably find this one a little easier, but bear in mind it may not exactly work in Flogorithm, but do it in Flogorithm still, but it'll be a case just like we did in modules. We may well have to just paper check the stuff on it. Okay? Because I'm not sure how many functions are in there, and then I say it doesn't exactly work right, but it's going to work as opposed to modules. Our problem was they wanted to return multiple values and stuff to it. Here you're returning one value, so when you're creating the function on it, it's going to work fine on you creating the functions. So those will work fine when you write with your own function in there, that you'll be able to do that correctly in Flowgorithm and should work. But there could be, we could bump into a factor on it of not exactly working. But if it's one that won't work, send me an email, ask me what the problem is on it. Ideally, send me what you did as the flowchart at that point, and then I can look at it and see, is it something you did, or will it actually work, that I can play around with it for a moment and go, wait a minute, you got to do this to get the function to work correctly. Okay?